So here we are, sharing secrets of the soil with me, your host, Regen Ray. Hello, soil lovers. Regen Ray here, and welcome to another episode of Secrets of the Soil. You're hanging out with Regen Ray, and today we're going to be talking to Louise from Carbon Sync. Louise, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ray. It's great to be here.
So tell us a little bit about what Carbon Sync is all about.
Well, Carbon Sync is about ecosystem restoration, right? And that restoration starts from the soil and moves up through the soil into the plants and then into all of the trophic levels of organisms and animals that exist in a farm ecosystem.
Excellent. And there's a bit of a play on the word sink there, because it's like sink within like being in sync. And then a lot of people talk about carbon sink as like sinking it into the soil. Is there an intentional play on that? And is that, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Sink has lots of meanings. So yes, the carbon sink play on words is obvious. Most people know what that's about. But, it's also about syncing up, bringing together, all of the components of an ecosystem. So that's, your soil microbes, your animals and birds and plants and people and people's minds and people's hearts to come together to restore our ecosystems for the health of the planet and everything that lives on it.
No, I love that. I think being in the word that also comes to mind is like in symbiosis, which is a bit of a word that freaks people out. But I think, being in sync, like you said, with the animals, with the plants, with the soil, with the rhythms of the season, with the heart and the spirit, I think that's really, the things that get me excited as I go deeper into this quest of soil.
Yes. And then there's another component to sync as well, and that's, about bringing together all of the information, the ecological information, the economic information, all of the data that comes together to share the story of the regeneration journey with the stakeholders that are involved in our programs.
Yeah, so who are the people that are getting involved in the programs, and how do you help, and what's kind of the person you're looking for?
Well, obviously the most important stakeholder in our programs are the farmers.
Love that.
So we work in the Southwest Land Division of Western Australia. Predominantly, most of our work is done in the wheat belt. So we're working with cropping and grazing and mixed cropping enterprises in the Southwest Land Division.
Yeah, awesome. And so I know when we spoke in the past, and I see the things that you're doing, you're very good at bringing like people and technologies kind of together. Can you unpack that a little bit? Like, where does this world of tech and ag and people and spirit kind of come together and sit in this kind of nice centerpiece?
People get really excited about tech, and tech is fantastic. It's good stuff.
Yeah.
But in our business, tech is not the main game. Tech is the enabler that supports us to do a lot of the things that we do. The main game in our business is people and community and farmers, and them learning and sharing their experiences and from each other, and then a wide variety of people who are engaged by Carbon Sync to support the farmer on their journeys. So that's the main game here. We see this work as being a social and a cultural transformation primarily. That's the first thing. And then, of course, there's some technical work that needs to be done to implement the practices that enhance the health of the soil. But really, it's about hearts and minds.
Yeah, I love that. I often say that the regenerative human is probably, regenerative mindset is the first thing that we should be regenerating, and then the rest of it kind of comes through this lens. And I think the people that is a very key part of that kind of ecosystem that makes it. And sometimes it's about the person moving out of the way and observing nature and letting nature do what nature does best. You obviously hang around with people who are talking carbon every day, and I worry that maybe carbon gets a bit of a negative rap in this whole kind of carbon is bad and carbon emissions and so forth. So what's your, like, first off, what does carbon mean to you in your world, and how is that fitting into like the work of giving carbon a good PR rap?
Okay, so Ray, I've been on this journey for at least 20 years.
Yeah.
Right, I've been through all the iterations of agricultural innovation, organics, sustainable agriculture, conservation agriculture, biological agriculture, and now we're in regenerative agriculture, right?
Yeah.
I've travelled all over the world, and I've worked with some amazing people that have been, their primary goal has been to support farmers to, really take care of their bottom line, their economics, but at the same time take care of the environment, and in many cases, restore the health of their farm ecosystem, right? So it's a long time. And a lot of this work is not scaling, right? And there's good reason for that. And that's that they're in the past, and if we just look at Western Australia as an example, we had huge publicly funded agricultural extension services. 15 years ago, we had like at least 800 extension agents employed by the state that supported farmers to adopt new and emerging agricultural management practices. But at some point, governments decided to divest in those services. And now the whole support of farmers is really left to the private sector. And so that work is now really being done in the agribusiness domain. And a lot of these regenerative practices and mindsets are kind of not so compatible with those business models.
Yeah.
But how do you fund the work of working with people's hearts and minds?
$1 million question.
It's not an easy thing to fund, right? So the really exciting thing for me is that carbon enables a business like Carbon Sync to deliver, the services of supporting them in these practice changes, which is, it's education, it's technical support, and it's monitoring services, in a way that can be sustained for decades. And it's actually the only business model or business case that I have found that enables us to do this work over the time frame that is required to make these transitions. So that's really what carbon means to me. It's one indicator of the success of the work that we do, that we get paid for, and that the farmers get paid for.
Yeah, and so what about in the fact that a lot of people are demonizing carbon and like this disconnect of understanding like carbon in the soil and carbon in the atmosphere? Do you have many opinions or thoughts on we don't necessarily need to say carbon is bad, but we need to focus more on the carbon cycling and bringing some healthy levels in the atmosphere, but thinking some into like soil, into trees, into vegetation, food forests, all those other things? Because a lot of people sit here going, oh, carbon credits are bad, it just lets other people pollute and things like that. How do you speak to those kind of points?
Okay, well, the first thing that you're heading towards is, carbon exists in the environment in a cycle, right?
Yeah.
And carbon exists in many different places. So the problem that we have is that we have too much carbon in the atmosphere and are not enough in our terrestrial ecosystems, because we have degraded those terrestrial ecosystems, right? So the task for us is to restore the health of those terrestrial ecosystems, to remove the carbon from the atmosphere and store it in soil. But it also brings many, many other co-benefits. So, it increases the resilience of those ecosystems to the impacts of climate change, improves biodiversity, improves nutrient cycling, and water holding capacity, which are all, tangible benefits to a farmer, right? So there are a lot of co-benefits to the work that we do. But on the side of, carbon credits are bad because they allow polluters to pollute. Well, that's an interesting question. And I've given that lots of consideration. And my view on that matter is that the polluters' problems of their pollution is not the problem that carbon sink is trying to solve. The problem that carbon sink is trying to solve is the degradation of our agricultural ecosystems. And we need a lot of resources to resolve these issues. Like across Australia, it literally needs billions and billions of dollars of investment to actually restore those ecosystems. And this mechanism is a way in which we can do that work. So I don't have any influence over government policy. I don't have any control over enormous big multinational corporations that are doing this stuff. So I'm working in my sphere of influence and where I can have an impact. You know, my view is that if you believe that carbon credits are bad because they're giving polluters a license to pollute, then the place where you can address that is politically, because this is a policy matter.
Yeah.
If we can
with your dollars, what you're buying.
Yeah, but I would say that the most powerful lever is the political lever.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I worry in a world where the polluters keep polluting and there is no way of offsetting. You know, something is better than nothing. And, you know, they will have, as they always have, you know, kind of gone on that trajectory, and they're in the world of manufacturing or creating, and that's unfortunately like a byproduct of it. And that will still exist. You know, we're not going to shut industries down because of, you know, a few policies and so forth, but we got to work a way where it's a happy medium. And I think you're right, even if we focus more on better educating people about making better buying decisions, understanding this movement of regeneration or regenerative, or as you mentioned before, insert buzzword here, farming. It's interesting because I think it's more about consumers being a little bit more educated and knowing that they've got the buying decision to buy things with more, I call it kind of conscious consumers, you know, buying things with being conscious about where your dollars are going, and allowing farmers to be empowered to, you know, activate programs like yourselves to make better decisions and so forth. So who are some of the farmers that you're working with and helping with? You mentioned a lot about the wheat belt. What are some of the results that you're working with farmers and things that you're solving for them?
Yeah. Okay. So our projects are just launching now. So we are in the process of enrolling farmers into our projects.
Awesome.
Right. So the key things that we're working on with farmers is it starts with soil health. So it's about improving the health of your soil and generating income for those measured improvements in the soil of your health through helping your soil through carbon credits. The second thing that we're moving into is nature repair and ecosystem services. So this is another huge market that is emerging. Last year, the Australian government passed the Nature Repair Market Bill, which is the foundational legislation that will build this market for ecosystem services, which is really exciting. And then the third area that we're working in is agricultural decarbonisation. So all of these things fit together, right? Like when you work to improve the health of your soil, by default, you enhance the health of your farm ecosystem, and there are measures that can prove that you have increased your biodiversity and the health of your system, which are things that people want to pay for, right? And then the last piece of this is decarbonisation. So you actually can't improve the health of your ecosystem by continuing to do many of the things that your most farmers are currently doing, high applications of synthetic fertilizers and pesticides and chemicals. Now, fertilizers, pesticides and chemicals certainly have their place. We're not saying that we don't use them. What we're saying is that you can use a hell of a lot less of them and improve the health of your farm, improve your bottom line, and be rewarded for that, because by reducing your emissions intensities of the product or the commodity that you're producing, you're in a stronger position in a marketplace that is starting to demand lower carbon intensity production. So that's the scope of work that Carbon Sync is engaged in. And we're also engaged in 2 cooperative research centres, the Net Zero CRC for Ag, which has just got across the line with $300 million of funding, which is exciting.
Amazing.
And we're also joining the Nature Positive Economy CRC, which is just about to put its bid forward. So we're working, within a broad stakeholder group with farmers. We're doing research. We're working with industry partners across the supply chain. So yeah, it's a pretty exciting space to be in.
I agree, and it's do you still feel like it's the early days, like the foundation of it's still trying to be laid out, and or do you think we're now kind of in that build phase and ready for scale?
I would say most definitely the carbon market is at a very mature and advanced stage now. And this is something that a lot of farmers are not aware of. The Australian carbon market has been operating for 13 years now. It's one of the most robust markets in the world. It's the only market in the world that is nationally legislated, and it is regulated by the Australian government. Our carbon credits are considered some of the most highest integrity credits in the world. And Australia's decarbonisation policy is built on the foundation of carbon farming. So this is big stuff. It's important stuff, and farmers are going to play a big role in getting Australia to net zero.
Amazing. And aren't other places around the world looking at the Australian model for inspiration? Yeah,
absolutely. So the European Union is now working on establishing a carbon farming initiative under the European Green New Deal or something like that.
They always give it complicated names and then an acronym.
And they're drawing on a lot of the pioneering and foundational work that has been done in Australia. And I'd also like to make mention of the soil method in the Emissions Reduction Fund. That has been under development for over 10 years. There's been 1, 2, 3. Now we're onto the 4th method of the soil method, and it's humming now. We've ironed out all the kinks. We've done a lot of learning, and now we've finally got a method that's really working and is starting to develop carbon credits at significant scale.
Yeah, it's amazing. So good to see that other parts of the world are kind of made a mess of it and gone, oh, they're doing it good over in Australia. Let's look at their framework. Let's look at their methodology, and being able to create a bit of a gold standard for what that looks like in the carbon space. The other word that is being thrown around a lot in this conversation is the word regenerative. What does that mean to you? Because I guess that word is a bit of a buzzword. What does it mean to you? And do you feel that people that are in the marketing world, not looking at myself, will overuse it and kind of diminish it over time? How do you feel about that?
Yeah, it's certainly, it's a word that is being greenwashed.
Yeah.
For certain. I'm of the belief that, we shouldn't try and define regenerative agriculture, because regenerative agriculture is actually one of the reasons that after being through all of these movements in agriculture, regenerative agriculture is the most hopeful paradigm for a new agriculture that I have encountered. And the reason for that is that it's very inclusive, right? It's inclusive of everyone's values, everyone's practices. There is no, I describe it as, there's no rules, there's just tools, and what is the best tool for you and your context, and really the aim of the game here is to deliver regenerative outcomes. which is the enhancement of your, the health of your farm ecosystem, the health of your balance sheet, the well-being of your family, the health of your community. These are all of the outcomes that we're seeking with regenerative agriculture. And it's a continuum, if you're on that continuum, and if you're moving through that and you're improving those outcomes for you and your family and your farm, then in my mind, you're practicing regenerative agriculture.
Yeah, I love that. I agree. And I asked that question on purpose because everyone answers that a little bit differently, and it should be, that is like, the way it is. It means something different. It's not prescriptive. It is, I like what you said, it's not the rules, it's the tools. And it is very much of, you might discover no tilling. It doesn't mean you go and sell your tiller and never till your property again, because maybe your pathway to improving that soil, it does include some tilling. And so, like what you said before as well, there is a time and place for synthetic, fertilizers and inputs, but it's with the reason of we're doing this today for a better tomorrow, and this is our pathway to that. So I think, zooming out and seeing the many parts of the whole make a really good kind of experience. I'm assuming you've hung around the Alan Savory Institute a bit, and using the word context is one of their first kind of feelers.
I've done more than hung around the Savory Institute. Carbon Sink is a Savory hub.
Oh, there you go. Didn't even know that.
And I spent 2 weeks on Alan's ranch in Zimbabwe with Alan. Wow. Breakfast, lunch and dinner every day for 2 weeks in, January 2019.
Yeah. I'm going to cover that off a little bit more. Soil lovers, stick with us as we take a quick break. Hey there, soil lovers. Hope you're enjoying today's episode, but I wanted to interrupt the program to let you know of an amazing event that is happening in our own backyard in Australia, in Victoria. In March, Ray Archuleta is coming for the first time for his Australian visit. And thank you so much to Soil Restoration Farming and the team there for organising an amazing, fully submerged event around soil. What's better than one Ray on the Regen Ray show here is two Rays, because I'm also going to be there joining Ray Archuleta. I won't be on the stage, I'll be in the audience just soaking up the wisdom, but it'll be awesome to get to meet you guys. If you're coming along, let me know. But this conference, I think, is by far one of the best things that is lined up. There are also other speakers attending, so go and check out soilrestorationfarming.com.au. Click the big Ray Archuleta photo for his event. It goes from the 5th of March, which is a Tuesday, to Friday the 8th of March. There are conferences, there are master classes, there are other speakers, there's a dinner, there's lots of events for you to really get your mind into the world of soil and really understand it better. I remember watching videos of Ray on YouTube, and I really knew that he explained things really well. His demonstration videos of doing like water infiltration and, soil runoffs and, lots of different in the field experiments. His videos really fast tracked my understanding of the power of soil. So you now in Australia have the ability to be in the room with the right people to deepen your relationship and your understanding of soil. So there is no better time now than at the start of 2024 to start your regenerative journey or to better understand your connectivity to soil. This is for anyone who really wants to better understand, soil, the nutrient density of food, the way that we manage our land, rejuvenate our land, and really to get, the power of agriculture back into the power of us, the commons, the people, us who are eating the food that is produced. And there's always been this known that the more people who demand a better quality food system, the more that people will do it. And I think this is the opportunity for you to really get around the amazing content that is going to be covered over the 2-day conference and the 2-day masterclass. Like, there is no better room than this room to be in March. There's no coincidence they call him the soil guy. He's been advocating this from the early days of making sure that everyone in America better understands soil. And now he's coming to our backyard, which is really excited. So go check out soilrestorationfarming.com.au. I will be there the first 2 days during the conference. So if you're coming along, do let me know. There are different packages and different prices for whatever fits your budget. So check out the website soilrestorationfarming.com.au. I will see you at the Ray Archuleta conference in March. Until then, let's get back to the show. Welcome back, soil lovers. You're hanging out with Regen Ray and Louise from Carbon Sink. You were just talking about your amazing experience hanging out with Alan Savory, where you got to spend breakfast, lunch and dinner and on his ranch. Can you unpack that? Because you've got a big smile on my dial, and I'm sure the soul lovers would love to hear your experience with Alan Savory.
Yeah. So Alan Savory is a bit of a hero of mine, to be very honest with you.
Holding up his book at the moment. It's the first book that always comes out so often.
So I discovered holistic management, I think it was 2014. And it came from working with some graziers and just like looking at the environment that I was working in and thinking to myself, I don't think that like the potential of this land, we've got anywhere near the potential of this land, right? And it was just an intuitive feeling, you know. I had a lot of experience in soil and compost, but I hadn't at that time spent a huge amount of time with farmers on the ground. And I was looking for, trying to find, like, how can we capture more from this, you know? And I came across Brian Welberg and invited him to Perth to deliver some holistic management training to my clients. And this was the first time for me to encounter HM, and I was just, oh my God, this is it. Wow. So the thing that really strongly drew me to HM was that it's a decision-making framework that is applied within your unique context.
Yeah.
You know, so it's really, you know, it's you know, no rules, just tools.
Mm-hmm.
You know, everybody's environment is different. Everybody's values are different. Everybody's economic goals are different. You know, and I think when we empower farmers, you know, to really take charge of their lives and what they want, and we act as we support them to achieve their goals, we're going to be doing well for the planet. Because you know, everyone wants the best for their environment. You know, we all want that, and I just think that it's such a powerful process and a powerful tool. And you know, there's 50 years of working with this technology. You know, 50 years of evidence of it working. You know, I now know hundreds of regenerative farmers, and I've been all over the world and you know, met farmers that are practicing around these kinds of principles and frameworks. And you know, I just notice this, they're just more relaxed, a lot more relaxed.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, farming is hard work.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of risk. There's a lot of, you know, things that are outside of their control. And if their peace of mind can be within their control, then I think that they'll be serving themselves and the planet much better.
Yeah, love that. Brian Wilberg is also who I did the holistic management course with very recently, just after COVID. And has also been a guest on the podcast, episode 9. So if you want to hang out with Brian a little bit more and hear his story. And, you know, the works of holistic management from Alan Savory. And I remember the saying going through the program, I was probably a little bit naive in regards to what it was all about. And I remember sitting there and going, oh, it's not about what you do on the farm and, you know, get your boots dirty. And it's about, you know, context and decision making and having that framework. And I left kind of going, this felt more like personal coaching or life coaching or business coaching rather than, you know, farming. And then realizing, because, and this is why I said the statement before, where it's like the mindset matters before the techniques, because you just wouldn't go and do something once you know how to have those filters and the mindset, you know, views the world in a particular way. So it was really a great program for me. And I'm not a farmer, so I wasn't having those moments of like, oh, I'm going to go back to my farm and implement these grazing and resting kind of periods and stuff. But it was really, really cool to see the other people in the room and then being able to get a peek in the inside of what that world kind of looks like. And yeah, got a lot out of it. And you know, glad to hear that you were in those same rooms a lot earlier than me. And you've said before that you've done this for 20 odd years or longer. what kind of drew you into this initially, and what, like, do you remember that aha moment of like, I just want to keep digging deeper and deeper and deeper into this world?
I certainly do.
Yeah, share that. Let's do it.
Okay. 1996, I did my undergraduate degree in Japanese, and I did a elective unit called Ecofeminism. And I read a book called Ecofeminism by Dr. Vandana Shiva.
Ooh, yeah, cool.
And that book was just mind-blowing for me. It was about the impact of the Green Revolution that it had on India. I don't know if shall I tell everyone about the Green Revolution?
Well, there's nothing much green about it, but yes, I agree, because I think that is a big greenwashing. But yeah, I think do go into that a little bit.
Okay, so Green Revolution occurred after World War II, when we had a lot of munitions left over from the war, and they repurposed those munitions into fertilizers, which they distributed across the world and very much within the developing world. And in India, they started to use these synthetic fertilizers and saw enormous improvements in crop yields. But over time, it started to damage the soil, damage the water, and then it went from fertilizers to pesticides to herbicides to changes in crops, because certain crops could no longer grow in those degraded ecosystems. And that led to the impoverishment of subsistence communities in India, and enormous social and cultural devastation, like profound. And so that I was like, oh my goodness, that's a big problem. Yeah. And from there I became aware of soil and the power of soil and the power of healthy soil, and pursued that interest, which led into composting. And I manufactured compost at an industrial scale for many years and sold it to farmers. But then it took a little while for me to realise that what was happening in the developed world was also happening here in my own backyard, in the wheat belt of Western Australia. And when I understood the devastation and the degradation that has resulted from these industrial agricultural practices, I was like, holy moly, I want to do something about that. Yeah. So I've pretty much been obsessed with this problem for about 20 years.
Love that. I had the same, not the Vandana Shiva book, but had the same kind of epiphany moment when I was like discovering the power of soil, as I call it, going, we need to do something about this fast. And my kind of brain, Americans call money the greenback, because their money is green. And I kind of think, well, that's the only thing that was green out of the Green Revolution, is that a lot of people made a lot of greenback, money and corporate greed. And you're right, things that had skull and bones on the packaging was literally being sprayed onto our foods and waterways and rivers in the form of fertilizer or something that was meant to be positive. And yes, they yielded. Yes, the leaves went green, which is where the Green Revolution name came from. And, there's people who basically say they can walk on a paddock and there's like this pigment of green that that they're using certain types of fertilizers, because there's like this kind of real rich green that almost feels a little bit unnatural, a little bit photoshopped. And that's where the kind of name came from. I jokingly say it's all about the greenbacks, because a lot of people made a lot of money in this addiction to the next side, herbicides, pesticides. And when you break that word down, it literally means to kill, like suicide. And, no farmer intentionally goes on their farm wanting to kill things. But when the education structures and the agronomists and the companies are giving you stats and figures, you're doing the best with the best information you have. And I think it took years of then zooming out and going, I think this is wearing out. This is no longer effective, and maybe I don't feel as right. And that's where we then move more into that from head decision making to heart. And that's why I think the regenerative movement does have a lot of things around spirituality and, deciding with your heart or your gut feeling, and doesn't sometimes make logical sense going from all these inputs to what? I'm just going to let nature do it, or like cover crops, capture the sunlight and put it into soil. It's like, yeah, that's what plants are designed to do in forests. It feels a bit woo-woo, but when you slow down, you can kind of see the common sense and the science behind it as well, which fascinates me. And then the links between soil health and gut health is like the next chapter that's getting me very excited.
Yes, well and truly. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what I often say to some people as well, like, if there's ways that farmers can be rewarded for their transition, because when I first came into this space, that was the number one thing that farmers would say to me, like, I'd love to do it, but the banks are knocking, I don't have runway, I've got no money, like I'm about to lose the farm that's like 5th generation, like there's a lot of ego attached to that. And it was always money and banks and time. And it's funny because the banks are probably one of the reasons why there's so much cleared land, because on their paperwork, there was a field that said farmable land, and it normally meant cleared. So all the forest and vegetation that was on farms wasn't lendable against. And so farmers hired people to clear that land so they could go to the bank and get extra line of credit. Now the banks are all about natural capital and biodiversity credits. And it's like, you should be moving a lot faster to fix this because you kind of created this problem, in an indirect way. And again, they didn't know what they were doing. It was just the best information that people had in that day,
Yep, the banks are in my crosshairs, Ray. Don't you worry about that.
Yeah, I know. Same. We set up even a working group around that of like, like, how do we fund this with like, I always said there needs to be like lending of like with the regenerative transition loan. It's like, here's an interest-free loan for 5 years as you transition, and but banks weren't interested in those long-term products back. This was like 5 years ago.
They are gently heading in that direction.
Well,
so
I have no
CBA has got a product that they've brought out, and I think NAB is heading in that direction. So they've got a very important role to play.
Yeah, Rural Bank, I believe, also. Not that this is endorsing any of those companies, but I think you're right. Like, what I get a little bit frustrated with in this space is that it's not until they're pushed into a corner that they change. There's no like proactive thinking going, we could be ahead of the curve of this 5 years ago. It's like until they're starting to lose millions of dollars because, farmers are selling up or losing their land and the banks can't sell it. And, then they realize that, maybe we should have been more preventative rather than reactive. And anyway, another story for another day of me venting.
Yeah.
So, I guess, what's something about carbon that really, if you had like a magic wand and you could wave that, across the world, what's something that you'd love everyone to kind of know about carbon that you feel like is not getting the attention it needs?
Well, I suppose in agriculture, the big thing here is that, okay, so now we understand, climate change, and this is new and emerging in the mass consciousness, that climate change is a carbon emissions problem, and it's also a biodiversity problem, right? So, across the world, the terrestrial environment, 38% of land is under agricultural production. In Australia, 60% of our land mass is managed by farmers. The farmers can play a huge role in addressing the climate change problem. By participating in carbon markets and biodiversity markets, they can receive significant financial rewards. Very significant financial rewards, and also enhance the health and the resilience of their farm ecosystem. Reduce the costs of production, position themselves to access new markets and incentives for these low carbon, environmentally sustainable products. And it's it is complex. It's very, very complex. But I think now is the time to step into it.
Mm-hmm.
It's a big opportunity, and farmers can make a huge difference. And I think that's the message that I'd like to get out there, is that obviously be careful about who you engage with, but start engaging, start speaking to people, start learning about this sector, because there are huge opportunities.
Yeah. And I think this is all too often when some new emerging innovation happens, is like, so I guess, use the internet as an example. I'm sure there's lots of people who sat there and said, the internet thing, I don't need to get around that. And now we can't function unless we have like Starlink or some internet giving us some level of service. and I've always been a big advocate of this because, you know, I've hung around a lot of people and they sit on different parts of the spectrum of the carbon world. And it's like, do you want to be that person 15 years down the track going, I just wish I knew it better then, so I could have set myself up now? Because it's not retrospective from what I understand. So it's like, if you snooze, you lose. And so the longer you wait, the more you're kind of taking, especially if you're going down the regenerative path, why spend 10 years regenerating your farm and then doing your baseline when you could have just done it 10 years ago with the intentions not to sell, but just at least you know you're trucking it from a natural capital point of view.
Yeah, and there's also a really important thing to understand about these carbon markets, and that is the expectation across the world is that all industries and all businesses begin to operate in a nature and climate positive manner and can demonstrate that they're doing that. Once you get to a certain level of adoption, it becomes the expectation that you do that. It becomes business as usual, and all of the incentives for early adoption no longer exist, right? And we've got perfect examples of that. So if we think about the rooftop solar, right? So if you got into rooftop solar 15 years ago, when my parents got into rooftop solar, you know, they paid, you know, probably double or 2.5 times what you would pay now for the size of the system that they purchased. But because they got in early, they received all of these incentives, which meant that they received all of their power that they needed, plus what they paid for their system, they received triple that in government subsidies to get the scale of the rooftop solar industry to a place where it was accessible for everybody, which it is now. And all of those incentives don't exist anymore, right? Yeah. And that is literally what is going to happen in the agricultural space. So if you don't get on this in the next 5 years, you're probably not going to get on it.
Yeah, that's why they always say the early bird gets the worm. And that's a really good analogy because, you know, a lot of people, I know that people who signed up in those solar programs early on locked into rates where like the power companies were like, we should have never done this. Like, I can't believe they're getting paid all this money for yielding power because it was early. And yeah, you know, the benefit, you know, but those early adopters paved the way for the mass adoption down the track. But the people who did the mass adoption didn't get the same benefits or return on effort and investment as the original, you know, cohort. That's why it's always good to be early. You know, I'm an early adopter with tech and innovation and all that. And I get that. But I think most people don't. They wait for it to become mainstream. And by then that, you know, the perks of the ship sailing early kind of go away.
Yeah. And I mean, and also there's another thing to consider, right? So the Australian government's policy has been, you know, in agriculture is been a carrot approach, right? Every other industry in Australia has been a stick. If farmers don't get on board with this, the policy is going to change and it's going to be a stick. Right. And it's not going to be fun.
Yeah, you must do this now by this date or otherwise X will be true. And that's a really valid point. You know, I love that. Just sitting here with hearing you speak and I kind of pictured you, as you've explained, going on a lot of different farms. Can you share with us all lovers, like what's one thing that you can tell when you're on a regenerative farm that you don't see when it's not with, you know, a regenerative mindset?
Regenerative farmers are more relaxed, a lot more relaxed. Mm-hmm. They have a lot more confidence in themselves and a lot more confidence in their decision making as a general rule.
Mm-hmm. Nice. I love that. Yeah, I think that's really, really cool. You know, I was kind of maybe thinking, the grass is greener or the birds are chirpier, but, you know, it's back to the human, you know, being relaxed. And I think one of the things I've observed via osmosis, because I don't do it a lot, but it's like the mindset of abundance rather than scarcity. You know, I feel like, you know, even farmers who are selling directly to a membership model, they're planting their plants with the abundance of this is already sold. You know, if they're working on the other model, they're planting it and going, I hope someone buys it, and it comes from a space of scarcity. Otherwise, the banks are going to be knocked in. So, you know, that kind of mindset shift definitely changes that confidence and that, you know, regenerative farmers like, yeah, the gate's open, come on in, I've got nothing to hide, like go walking on the paddocks, like, you know, they all really know that everything's cool and collective, as opposed to the opposites where it's like, I'm under contract to have no biosecurity risks and you must stay on that side of the fence. And some of this kind of rah-rah stuff. But yeah, but sure, you can walk along the passage on the side of the farm. That's okay. But on this side of the fence, illegal, just crazy. Louise, it's been awesome chatting to you. We're getting to the tail end of the conversation, which means it's time to become the voice of the soil. Are you ready?
Sure. Yeah.
Excellent.
Okay.
Excellent. So you are now the soil. You've embodied its energy. You are its mouthpiece. What will you say to all the soil lovers listening today and in the future?
Oh, so I am the soil.
You are the soil.
Thank you for loving me.
Love that.
Thank you for taking care of me and sharing your love of me with everyone that you meet. Your enthusiasm and your passion, I really need you to keep that up.
Awesome.
Because I'm a part of you and you're a part of me.
Well said. Thank you very much, Louise, for being the voice of the soil. Your sigh at the start of that was very powerful, of like just sitting in with the soil. I think, the soil lovers are going to really feel that energy of transfer as you took that breath of sigh and went into becoming the voice of the soil. If any of the soil lovers, and I'm sure they will want to, get in touch with you, where do you hang out? How can they reach out? How can they find out more about getting started with some of the projects you're working on?
You can email me at louise@carbonsync.com.au.
Excellent.
And that's SYNC.
Yeah, not the kitchen sink.
Not the kitchen sink.
Love that. Excellent. And as always, the links will always be around the video or the show notes of the podcast player that you're listening to. Louise, any last words of wisdom for the soul lovers and getting them to think about something as they finish up and wrap up this conversation?
No, it's been a great chat and thank you for listening. I hope you've enjoyed our conversation. Yeah,
me personally, I want to say go check out all your social media. I absolutely love someone who's in marketing, and your social media posts are not intrusive. They're informative. They build knowledge. They're factual. They're very aesthetic to the eye. So from someone who's in marketing, I've been following what you've been working on. Whoever's doing it in your team, kudos to them, and recommend that the soul lovers go and follow all the social assets, because every day you'll find out a new fact or figure, a Q&A, a stat about carbon and soil and the world of regeneration.
Thank you. Thank you, Ray.
Excellent. There you go, soul lovers. That is another episode for you to sink your teeth in. Remember to share this episode around. It might not be you who's interested in carbon, but it might be your neighbor or your friend or your family, or maybe someone who's not even knows that they need to hear about this conversation. So always be sharing the secrets of the soil, because that is where the magic happens. Until next time, make sure that you get outside, get your hands dirty, and keep digging deeper into the wonderful world of soil. I'll catch you on the next show. Well, soil lovers, that's enough secrets for one episode. I really hope that you enjoyed all the secrets shared during this conversation. But hey, let's not keep it a secret. Please share this podcast around and make sure that you like it and leave us a review, because that really helps spread the secrets of the soil. Until next time, remember, get outside, get your hands dirty, and keep digging deeper into your soils.